Hey, Elena, welcome. Welcome to the sixth episode of our podcast. Maybe just a quick introduction from you.
Yeah, Björn, excited to be here. So I'm Elena, I'm the founder of Selftalk. We've built a platform for self-therapy and self-coaching protocols for teams so they can increase their performance.
Okay, very good. So maybe on your background. So the company is what from Moldova?
Yeah, actually the company is based in London and I started it after a few years of working in London. At that time, I was believing that I had my dream job in the startup ecosystem in London. I was part of a digital product studio. We used to launch digital products for other startups. Some of them became really successful. One of them became a unicorn, and that inspired me to start my own journey. So when COVID started, I had free time and I decided to invest it in getting my license as a therapist. I had quite a few of personal challenges I wanted to sort, and I found therapy quite expensive in London. While studying, I had this realization that actually there is a protocol to therapy and coaching, and the part of this protocol, people can do it on their own. And I mapped out the protocol my teacher taught me, and I started to share it with my friends. And I saw that I'm lighting up a bulb for them that, oh, it's possible to do it on your own. Like, oh, I should start trying it on my own. And from there, the idea for Self-Talk started. We wanted to build a platform where top therapists and coaches share their know-how. But first, they simplify it for people to be able to do it on their own. So this is how it started.
Do you feel like, the moment when you realized you wanted to build this company, was it more self-motivated or was it something maybe you saw in the teams you were working with, or maybe a blend of both?
Yeah, it was a blend of both because in the team I was working, we were all high performers, but still the team failed because of the way conflict was handled. There was quite a bit of conflict between the founders of the company, and I could see how that was affecting like my personal performance in the company, and also personally, I could notice how a breakup or something that happens in your personal life affects your performance at work. And I always valued my work, and I was very career driven. Like I love to work on something I'm passionate about. And having those periods in life when something emotionally was affecting my ability to work, like affected me. So I realized that how important emotional well-being is for performance. So it was a blend of the two, noticing how it affects leadership and team performance, but also noticing it on myself.
Yeah. I mean, teams, especially in startup world, they want to move really, really fast. Um, but at some point, I guess that also stops working. Like you said, there's something personal that happens to either a team member or even an executive, doesn't really matter. When does it stop working?
I think it stops working when the leadership loses clarity.
Okay.
As soon as the clarity is not there, where should we move? We can easily move in the wrong direction. So, and this is why or like more than 90% of startups they fail, not because people can't execute great ideas or they can't talk to customers or like most of the times these are very easy to learn skills, like when it comes to execution and hard skills. The most important part of why startups fails are the founder conflict and also in general people problems. There are some statistics from Harvard Business Schools that says that 65% of teams they fail because of people problems. And they can't scale. Some of them they can't scale because the culture is not scalable. So when you reach a higher a higher growth rate, like you can't sustain it. So yeah, that's the insight we've been building Self-Talk from, that people problems can break companies at larger scale if they are not addressed early on. An
Oh,
example here I have is that if you have a Ferrari and you're driving like with 200 miles an hour, a small stone can make you like a big accident. And it's important to make sure small stones are out of your way when you drive at very high speed. And those small stones can be a breakup that the founder goes through, or it can be a conflict, or sometimes even ability, like lower ability to communicate your vision or communicate what you truly believe in or understand your values. So yeah, that's my opinion on that.
Then, companies, they kind of keep pushing, right? Even if there are problems. And I wonder sometimes if it's a question of balance. To take Aftra as an example, maybe when we founded this company, we thought it was really important that we don't fall into a pit of just going all in on the tech and leave the sales for later, or go all in on sales and leave the tech for later. So we think about this quite a lot in terms of we don't want to put ourselves in a lot of debt. And also that's why we are trying to invest in people. But I still wonder about this. Why do the companies still keep pushing even when they know that there's lots of rocks on the journey, right?
Here, one of the explanations I have for myself is that the company is a mirror of the founder or the leadership that created it. And that comes from psychology, but also that comes from this concept also comes from ontology, the science of being and the nature of reality. But from psychology, even Jung explained concepts like that, that everything, like others, are a mirror of us. And this applies in business too. So, and sometimes, depending on the level of consciousness that the leader has, some people go through life in the same way, like missing out on important things, and they have some lessons out of it. Some people learn it faster. They have a higher level of self-awareness, and they can sense risks much early on. And from our collaboration, I know you are this type of person. Like you having a very high self-awareness, and you can sense what can be a risk very early on. It's not the same for other founders, and that's totally fine. It's a journey that everyone is on. They will learn it at an earlier stage, or they will never learn it. Maybe that's not a lesson for this life for them. So yeah, your company is a mirror of you, and sometimes what's important to you becomes important for your company too.
Okay, that's interesting. I also think just in terms of um, I guess just budget. So companies they're they're cutting cost when it comes to mental health support, or more concretely, they have a huge hiring budget, but they don't think about it in terms of budget. What is the cost of losing an employee versus hiring a new employee? And I think this is a strong motivator for me to think about, like, what does it actually cost when a senior person leaves, and how to think about retention of employees rather than hiring them.
Yeah.
Uh,
Statistics say that there is a 215% cost of the actual salary of that employee, of that key employee that leaves. And the cost to replace it, it actually doubles the salary. So it's an important cost. One way to address this, it's a framework we use called smart work design that measures around 30 aspects that impact performance. And it's a great framework to show the leadership what are their blind spots. Because as a leader, there's so many challenges in a startup, and like every day you have so many problems, and some of these things like people leaving, it's not on your immediate plate. Most of the time you need to take a step back and assess, like, who is at risk and who is not. But because of the daily fires you have to attack, it may not be straight in your eye, and that person may leave. Not many HR knows about it because it was developed after COVID. So there is the Future of Work Institute. They still make a lot of efforts to promote it and make HRs adopt it. But that's one way to make sure that the team you work with, you keep an eye on them, and we can measure how well these needs are met for each employee, and you can see who is at risk.
what are the outcomes that we're looking towards when we are like trying to provide these facilities to employees? Are we expecting that they will be happy at work, that they will not leave, that they will be more productive, more efficient, and so on? Or
So usually the outcome is something that the company is already measuring. Like, let's say if you have an NPS score that you are measuring, So we would look at an outcome like that. Let's say you want to make sure that they feel good at work, and one way to measure it is to see how would they recommend this company for their friends. Another outcome, like usually the way we measure these outcomes is through the system that the company already has. If they don't have a system yet, we look at this work design scores that we provide through our framework of smart work design. But usually these outcomes has to be defined before. It's, measuring well-being and mental health, it's not something you usually do. You usually see it in time. We have a saying that with one flower, the spring doesn't come with one flower. And here it's our job as a company to educate and like have a longer period of time where we measure the results. And the results should be measured from few different points. First is the performance of the company, because if there's no performance, there is no company. The second is the self-assessment and the feedback that the employees are saying, how they feel about it, if the things are changing in regards to the problems they shared, 3 months ago. And the third one, it's a quantitative analysis of these two, and having a data analysis type of thing that it's independent from employees' perspective, because our own feedback can sometimes be erronated, or just one day people didn't sleep very well and they give and they have this perspective that nothing works in this company. So we need to have like a third party independent analysis, and here we're running this psycholinguistic assessment where we can see how a person feels from the way they talk. For example, if we can, at the moment, for example, depression can be predicted with like 60 something percent from the way a person talks. So we are running this type of like third party psycholinguistic assessments to see if things have changed in a company over a period of time. This would
We
be some of the
talked
outcomes.
we talked about this a little bit last time we spoke. I mentioned it actually was a joke that I heard. It's this a stand-up comedian in Iceland, and he's telling a story of, his grandmother and grandfather that are working really like hard jobs as tending to the cows and to the sheep in Iceland. They do it like
Mhm.
from 5 in the morning until like late at night every day. There's no summer vacation. But I think we discussed that it seems like the people that did this sort of hard work, they did not show any particular symptoms of depression or burnout or anything like that, even despite working such a hard day. But in the last 20 or 30 years, it seems like something has changed in our culture that seems to promote, I guess, I don't know even know what to call it, lifestyle related mental illnesses. Is that something that you resonate with?
It is actually, and there is psychologists are also worried about them, and they researched it for some time, and they call it alienation. There are four types of alienations going on in the last years. So there is an alienation from meaningful work, and another one is alienation from nature, as we move to the cities and we spend more time in front of screens. It impacts us greatly. The third one, it's alienation from others. With the rise of social media, we have an illusion of connection, and most of the time, not a meaningful, deep connection. The fourth type of alienation that's happening at the moment, it's alienation from our true self. Through all the chemicals we are using in our food, through all these false beliefs of what others are in on social media, we are disconnecting from who we truly are. And my positive part, or like my hope here, is that I see movements that go back to the roots. And I see them specifically among younger generations because they suffer the most from it. So it's not all lost. I notice at the moment a transition towards healthier methods of living. Yeah, I was curious, because you're in cybersecurity and I'm learning about this subject more and more. But from the first time that I've seen the podcast Hack and Tell, I was curious to see what similarities do you see between mental health and well-being and cybersecurity, because they have a specific similarity of being proactive about your own security or like your own well-being. And I was curious
Yeah.
your opinion on that.
Yeah. If you think about psychological safety in terms of the ability to make mistakes, I think, is huge. Companies that get hacked either through a vulnerability, through mistakes of employees, or even that the employees are tricked in some way. And I think there is a sort of like an older culture that says, the mistakes are a bad thing. People are being punished for clicking the phishing link or something like that. And I think just that kind of culture can promote, um, again, culture where people are hiding mistakes for longer, incidents are being reported later, and therefore progress is coming along later. Building a mistake culture that it's okay or that it's all around learning from mistakes is an enormous positive. At my previous company, we used to run phishing simulations. So we would essentially be
Mm.
designing tricks to trick employees into clicking the link. And back in the day, what we were measuring was essentially how many people clicked the link. And that's sort of like what the KPI that would go into the measurements. But I had a kind of like an argument with a colleague, where I said, in some scenario, you're always going to find a way to trick a person using something to click the link. So it's a completely useless metric. It's all about the context. So we thought, what about instead we should measure how many people actually report that there's a
Mm.
possibility of phishing. And I think it's a much stronger metric.
I really like your idea about blame culture because a blame culture will not reduce mistakes, it will only hide them. And that's making things worse in terms of security, but also in terms of culture, that you do not want a culture like that.
I was gonna sort of jump on that in a few ways, I guess. You know, for leadership to make a decision on having, building a culture where you're learning from mistakes. So it's not about making mistakes okay, or it's okay to make mistakes. That's not really the point here. It's about making it a vehicle for learning. But we're also human, right?
Yeah.
So if we go back to this idea of budget versus retention budget, so we know for a fact that it's probably more cost effective to have a good retention budget rather than a hiring budget. But even I have, found myself guilty of just saying, oh, let's just, hire a new person and, they get a salary increase. And we know that people that shop around for jobs, they tend to have higher average wages than the ones that stay for longer. So there's a discrepancy in what we know and how we behave. Same for blame culture versus, like learning from mistakes culture. You know, we need to make a very conscious decision to change this. And then we also need to follow up. So it's a long run, it's a distance run with intermittent sprints. And you kind of have to catch yourself multiple times along the way. And I think this also goes, so maybe to segue into a new thing, is, leaders say that they care about team health, but then you have a budget and, you don't have the stamina to actually go and wait for the things to improve or to measure them or, things like that. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, and I think the my first one of the thoughts is that this journey of being a leader is not for everyone. So because there is so much pressure on figuring out things on the way, trialing and error, and changing yourself so much on the way. The second idea that came to me here was about the fact that it's not so this is why we have like great leaders we learn from, and we need a support system where we like best practices and people that are going through this process get to learn from others on like what works best and what should be done. We can't afford ourselves like 3 months to go learn something, so we need tools that would help us do things faster. And to be sincere, with the way AI is changing our work, like our work, those tools are becoming more and more available that would help us support us. But also the way we work is changing. Teams are getting smaller. Work is becoming more intimate, and we would better build those strong relationships with people that we're already working and go with them together through all this transition, because at the moment, personally, I've never experienced so much uncertainty and so much craziness all at the same time, coming from all from politics, from innovation, from environment. Like everything is just changing so much. So at the same time there is such a big opportunity because the tools we are having enable us to perform at a much higher speed. So one place where I see it's really worth investing time to figure out is our own emotions. Because we humans, we are not great with self-awareness. Our mind is lying to us. And when you said about running a test on checking how many people will click on a link, I think for us a similar test would be making you believe something that it's not actually true. So our mind, we really need to be carefully on what we believe, and to select those beliefs that are only beneficial for us.
But don't you think that, the chat GPTs and the LLMs, they have such a strong bias for giving you what you want or what you're asking
Yeah,
for?
yeah, yeah,
Aren't
yeah,
aren't they,
yeah.
aren't they also promoting this idea of, bad self-awareness? It's like, I don't know, you're just asking it, like you would your friends. Oh, shouldn't I just do this? Shouldn't I just fast for 7 days? Then I'll lose all the weight. What a great question. Yeah, that's a great idea.
In regards to that, I did fasted for 7 days. So yeah, actually, it's a big risk right now. So are predicting an AI psychosis coming up in a few years, the result of us developing delusional thoughts. And that's a real risk, that's a real risk for the mind, the same that cybersecurity risks are on the table right now with the growth of AI. So yeah, it's a matter of us. I think the solution to that is like education. There is great benefit, like everything has great benefits, like the fire, it has a great benefit for us, but also it can be used very wrongly. It's everything is with AI. And what I truly believe is in developing our own internal ability to think critically about things, and also to understand what's aligned with you and what's not aligned with you. Do I really want that? I don't. So that's a quest that the human nature had from back in the days, and that quest is not cancelled by the appearance of AI.
And, about AI, because it has such a strong bias for telling you what you want or giving you a result. We, for example, have been using it for, code reviews at the company. And it doesn't matter how many times we run it, it's always going to give us this like one critical and three highs. Even, when we find out it's not a real issue. But it's just so good at wanting to give advice. It's a good dog. It's gonna it's gonna fetch the stick. And I think in terms of like technical cybersecurity, there needs to be a different incentive in the models because it needs to want to tell you everything is fine and find a reason not to. And I think this also goes into this idea of, building up this kind of like an internal ability to moderate what you're being told. Because in a conversation, people are telling you about this, conspiracy theory. Internally, you're like, yeah, that's probably just bullshit, right? You need to be able to do this with AI as well. And I think that we just need there's so many things
Yeah,
that we need. But one of
yeah,
these things is a very different type of incentive for the LLMs depending on the task that it's doing.
yeah. And that's why I think we need a human involved in a big part of the tasks. I don't think we will be ever able to reduce human error or like to be perfect. The illusion of being like ideal is not like we're never gonna be. And psychologists talk about this inner drive to be good and like to be this like everything to be fine. And Jung says that actually the goal of a human being is to be whole, to bring all these parts back into ourselves and to accept them. So it's not for us to be good, and like we will not reach a level where everything is perfect. We will always have challenges. It's about developing those ways of being within ourselves that would help us deal with those challenges in a better and better way. So that's one point to make here. Another one in regards to AI, like what my hope is in people like you and like our company, that we have experience in a specific area, and we know how to use AI to not increase this confirmation bias, and to keep to make use of this like great resource that's AI, but still use it in a way that's not making more harm than good. So in our case, the way we address this challenge is to keep the psychologist or the coach involved in the process of doing therapy or coaching with AI. So we have built a system where we combine the prompts, protocols from psychologists, and we added AI at each step of the protocol to not let the AI run the therapy, to not reconfirm these beliefs that the client already have. So we're making a trio of like AI, psychologist, and the client. And everyone is playing their role. And only in this way is possible to scale therapy, because before it was not possible to scale therapy without, like, it was not possible. The human resource was limited. Now with AI and with therapists from protocol, there is a real chance to scale therapy and coaching at levels that were never possible before.
So, I mean, I totally agree. But back on sort of like the team health, and leaders need to understand that this is important, and they need to, they need to be convinced. Like, how do you get executive leadership to take something like mental health or therapy seriously? What have you been using? What have you been finding?
So from our own experience is that we can never convince them if they're not open to that. We cannot come and convince them that this is important, and we don't go into that direction either. When they come to us and when they experience a pain, and to grow in general, to educate leadership that when you experience a pain in a repeated way, like something is not working even if you tried, then there it's a psychological block. And for us, one way is to educate that behind some the problems that keep repeating, there is something that comes from the subconscious mind that can be addressed. So there is something psychologically that we can work on. Therapy and coaching is something that you cannot impose on people. It should have to come from within. And it makes it even worse if you go and tell someone, hey, you need therapy. Hey, you need coaching, or like, oh, you have a problem there. It's working the opposite when you do that. So what we are working on is to educate and make this, like, plant this seed that there is an alternative solution to the problem you are facing that you didn't know about. There is an alternative to that problem coming from the psychology science. And that's for the first part, educating that there is an alternative, things that you are not aware about. And the second part is to measure things and show that there is a direct return on investment.
Mm.
Because leaders are interested for their company to perform. Some companies can't afford to do therapy and coaching because they're barely surviving and they need cash.
I think for me, just to be sort of like bought in, since I apparently am a senior leadership, it was kind of like, reducing instability. It was about improving talent preservation, lowering risk type of things. But it was all sort of like a high signal stuff. Instead of the typical, let's measure, like user engagement or employees promoter score. But usually it comes with a very low signal. It's just we are in a pyramid. We are green, we are yellow, we are red. But there's no actionable. So I did not want to do that. And same for, having something actionable and measurable, and something that you can actually sort of track over a long time to improve your team as a whole is sort of what got me into this. Um, and also one thing, and we discussed this actually last time, it's not on air, sadly, this idea of building skills, not just therapy for an indeterminate amount of time, but actually building some skills, how to deal with feedback, how to provide feedback, how to create a longer lasting engagement or resilience being in a startup. These are things that we can probably learn over a period of time instead of just being in
Yeah.
therapy forever, right?
Yeah. And my own theory here is that some of these things we should have been taught in kindergarten. like how to communicate your needs. Why are you angry? These are such basic things in terms of emotional health that the way you know how to brush your teeth every day is the same way that you should know how to take care of your emotional
Every
state every
day?
way. So you're not like, like, so I think as soon as we develop the skill, you're not even, you apply it unconsciously. As soon as you learn how to ride a bike, it's not like you know it, you don't have to remember it, so it's just there. But because we don't know it, like like comes with effort for us. Like every day to analyze my own emotional state, like sounds hard, but it's a skill that if you learn, you're applying it unconsciously, and it's not requiring effort for you, but you are feeling every day in like a good emotional health. So that's my part of theory. And the second part is about businesses. My degree in school was business administration. I did marketing and law, but main subject was business administration. I was never taught how to give feedback. And I was never taught this like basic skills of building a team, like because that's actually when you learn business administration, you're supposed that you're going to have your own business. And there, about team management, it was not much there in terms of like how to motivate your team, how to take care of their needs, why would they work with you. So yeah, and now I think it's time, with all the automations coming from AI, I think leaders are going to be naturally pushed into learning this part of the job.
So, based on what we've discussed today and sort of like your experience in this field, would you be able to summarize into maybe one, two, or three key takeaways for, companies that are wanting to invest into this, into mental health, into measuring it over time?
Yeah, sure. So I think the first one is for leadership to be aware of the mirroring effect. When I became aware that my team mirrors me, it was such a relief in a way, because I tend to be a control freak, and when I realized that they mirror me, I had this insight that, oh, now I just have to be a model for the behaviors I want for a specific period of time, and after that they will mirror me. Start observing it, how your team mirrors you. Pushing is not working. It makes things work. So come back to the mirroring effect and like see what you want your team to mirror you and model that behavior. And the third part is emotions are contagious. It's like a virus. Now that we talk about cybersecurity, also emotions are like a virus. They spread within your team, and it's really important to take care of your own emotions first. They can be regulated. People avoid to talk about emotions at work, and we had clients saying, I don't speak emotions. We don't do emotions at work. It's not normal to bring your emotions at work. You have to keep them for yourself or something like that. And that's not a great management strategy, because they are hidden under like they are hidden somewhere under, and at some point people leave without even telling you why, but that there's some emotional reasons over there. Because this saying that people don't leave bad jobs, they leave bad managers, is true. So we should be patient with the first interactions with bringing emotions and talking about them. Many leaders are afraid of talking about it because they're not educated on emotions. So the last thing I will leave leaders with is that the same you learn cloud code tools, like how to automate stuff in your company, it's something totally new. In the same way, you can learn about emotions.
I think it's really interesting this idea about, people are afraid of emotions, but you said something like, but you can actually regulate them. Do you think that that's a big part of it? It's about, you don't want to talk about emotions because it insinuates that you are out of control.
Yeah, because we
You are
don't know
feeling
how to regulate them. Yeah,
right. I
and
learned
it's
something
it's
today.
yeah, and it's totally fine if we used to not control them. Like emotions, if they're not lived, they are gathered into our subconscious mind, and when you start to leave them, like they may come over you and everything is so confusing. That's just the process. As soon as you start cleaning up, like if you have a room there in your subconscious mind where you stored all the emotions you didn't want to look at, it's quite busy there right now. So you have to do like a spring cleaning or something. And there after you do this like spring cleaning or like something more emotionally intense to release some stuff, you start to learn, oh, actually, I can control my anger. Actually, this is how you deal with grief, or like this is how you deal with sadness. And you step by step, you do some baby steps to learn how to regulate them. And after that, you're not that afraid. It's like you break your arm, you go to the doctor, you fix it, you take 3 months, it's gonna be well, don't worry. There are gonna be maybe some complications, I don't know, maybe you're a very complex case, but don't worry, there is a solution to that. People figured it out before. Trust the process. It's just that the fact that it's intangible, you cannot see your mind, you cannot touch it.
You can't like see it's being fixed. You have to sort of, like
Yeah,
you said, you have to trust the process.
yeah.
And maybe I'm out on a limb here, but maybe there are people that actually don't need to get fixed. So there isn't necessarily anything broken, but they're still like working on themselves.
Actually, the concept of being fixed is not even real. Therapists don't use this being fixed. This is something people outside of like therapy and coaching that use it, because we are not something static. We are a process that's in continuous development, and there is nothing to be fixed. It's just something to be integrated. So in general, when we use the word fix, like it implies in the other person that something is wrong with me. There is trauma, and trauma shaped us in a specific way. And it's a matter of understanding what that shape and how uniquely our traumas or our childhood events, in what unique way it shaped us, and how can we make the best use of that uniqueness to bring impact in the world.
I mean, I love it. Maybe wrapping up sort of the formal part of this is, if I were to leave a message, for leaders, is that, businesses are predominantly human and everything is a process. So, we aren't going to get everything 100%. We need to strive for, improvement and trust the process. And that also goes for security, maybe.
Yeah, and also your team mirrors you, and as soon as you model those behaviors that you want your team to have, that's a safe path to change.
Okay. I would like to remind everyone that is listening that you can follow us on LinkedIn, Spotify, YouTube, TikTok, probably other venues, and there will be links to follow. Thank you so much, Elena, for joining us today. It's been a delight.
On my side too. Thank you for inviting me.